Hello and welcome to this video on how I made this raglan sleeved nice fluffy teddy winter coat. Here is the fabric and it's so nice, and here is the jacket that I'm using as a template. This one is no pattern, so it's simply just using the jacket I have. Just cutting the fabric off, so I have two pieces, one for the back and one for the front. The one for the front I'm just going to cut into two because it doesn't need to have a fold. Just measuring so it's the same length as my zipper, then placing the jacket that I'm going to use as a template and just marking where the lines are and adding a bit of seam allowance so I have something to sew on, cutting off the excess fabric, and then I'm just going to make the bottom, because this one has like this nice angular curved bottom that I'm going to replicate. And the back piece I'm not going to cut up because I want to keep that fold there. Marking again where are the seams and just adding a few extra centimeters of seam allowance so I have enough when I stitch it together. Cutting off at the bottom, same angular, and there. And I'm making it a little bit longer than the coat that I'm using as a template. For the raglan sleeves, I've got 4 layers of fabric here, so 2 folds, and I'm placing the sleeve so the folds on the sleeve is aligned with the folds on the fabric, and again marking where the seams are and adding a couple of centimeters extra seam allowance. Just cutting through this fabric, and it's quite thick, so I'm being careful when I'm cutting through it, not cutting through all 4 layers at once. And I'm just making sure that both these sleeves will be the same size as well. Yes. And you use quite a bit of extra fabric when you make these raglan sleeves. I'm also going to make the collar, and I'm just going to cut that approximately so I have a front and a back piece for the collar that I'm going to put on. Now I'm stitching them together, so I'm going to start with the, I can't actually see what I'm starting here. I think that was the back piece, and then I'm stitching on one of the sleeves, and then I'm stitching on one of the front pieces to the other side of the sleeve. And when you make a coat like this so quickly, you have to try it on afterwards, stitching this part together, just to see how it fits, if it's way too big or way too small, because of course this is just kind of, making a coat on the go and not being that specific with measurements, or not specific at all. So I've given it too much seam allowance, or I don't know what I've done, because now I'm stitching it together, and in a moment I will be trying to put on the collar, and then the body will actually be a little bit too big. But here you can see what it looks like. And now I'm going to stitch the arms together. So I'm starting at the bottom of the arm opening, and now I'm coming up to under the arm and then all the way down the sides here. That's one piece stitched together. I'm folding out the sleeve, looks nice. And then I'm going to stitch the other sleeve. So again, I'm starting at the bottom of the sleeve opening, stitching it together all the way under the arm and down the sides. So that is basically our coat, the first part of it anyways. Yes, so for the collar, I am putting these 2 pieces of fabric front to front, and I'm going to stitch on 3 of the sides. So one of the short sides, one of the long sides, and then again one of the short sides towards the end. I didn't cut the fabric perfectly, so I'm just cutting a little bit extra off there. Folding it out, pressing out the corners, and now I'm going to attach it to the opening here. And as you can see, that opening was too big, so I'm just going to make the raglan sleeves like where they meet at the top opening. I'm going to make them a little bit more narrow, so I'm just starting in the middle of the seam and then just making it like 1 centimeter smaller on each side, just seeing how that looks like. So now it's basically smaller, and then I'm going to attach it. I'm just going to cut off some of the excess fabric. There's no point in that being there right now. So yes, then I'm going to attach it. I'm not going to go all the way towards the edge because I need to just have 1 centimeter to attach the zipper on. And then there's still a little bit of excess fabric, but I'm going to just distribute that evenly, put in some pins and needles, and then make sure that it's distributed, and just I stitch it on very carefully. You can actually do that with a lot of fabric. And I don't know what it's actually called, but I'm just very careful when I'm stitching it on. Just pressing, making sure the fabric isn't like lying in a big bulk somewhere, but that it's evenly distributed between where the color starts and ends. And that looks nice. Then I'm gonna make some pockets, and I'm gonna put some bias tape on all the way around the pocket, because then it's gonna be nice and easy to stitch on and not so bulky as well. So I'm just stitching on the bias tape and then folding it towards the back and stitching it in place. Doing that on those two sides first, stitching it in place. So the bias tape is visible on the back, and then I'm going to stitch it on the two remaining sides as well. And I'm stitching it on in the fold. Again, folding it towards the back and stitching it in place. And just, yeah, tucking in the corners there. That's the hardest part, but it's not that difficult. Stitching it in place, almost done. As you can see, the other pocket is already stitched on, but I'm just going to show you how to stitch this one on. Of course, I wasn't going to show you how to stitch that on. Sorry, I'm going to show you how to put the zipper on. So align it with the opening of the coat, and just stitch as close to the zipper as you possibly can, all the way down. Make sure the front of the zipper is facing the front of the fabric, and this zipper doesn't go all the way down, but that's the way my daughter wanted it. She didn't want it to close all the way towards the bottom. And then I'm just going to line it here on the other side, because I want to be sure that the zipper ends the same place at the top. And I'm also going to be sure that the zipper ends the same place in the back or at the bottom, because if I just start stitching, the fabric might actually move because it's a little bit stretchy. So I'm going to stitch it in place at the top and then start from the bottom. And then again, I'm going to distribute it evenly all the way as I stitch. You can see here I'm trying to like hold it in place, making sure that I don't have a big bulky bit of fabric towards the end. And then just stitching it on there at top again. And then you can see the zipper is on, it's great. And here comes the pocket. So I'm going to line it with the other pocket and make sure that they look similar in their placement. And then I need to be careful that I don't stitch it on at the top, but I keep that open. So I'm going to carefully put it into my machine and stitch it kind of close to the edge and all the way down, and turning it and stitching the bottom of the pocket closed and putting out, taking out the needles now, and then just stitching the last remaining side. And then we have a pocket that's ready to warm your hands. Cool. Then I also made some lining. As you can see here, I made the exact same measurements of lining, and I have stitched it together apart from that open bit on the sleeve that I just showed you. That's because that's what we're going to use to turn the coat through. So I'm aligning the lining of the jacket with the front opening of the jacket where the zipper is being put on. So the zipper is between those two layers of fabric. So the front layer of the lining is facing the front layer of the fabric, and the zipper is in between them. I'm just going to stitch on the other side as well. So if I turn it around, I have the zipper coming out between those two layers of fabric. Then I'm just going to make a little strap that I can use to, so I can hang up the coat. And just changing my thread, And I'm just going to stitch it in place and do that on both ends, so it makes a nice little loop so I can hang it up. That's one of those little details that's nice to do when you make something yourself. And then the lining, the top of the lining is going to be attached to the top of the coat. And I haven't made the sleeves or the opening here smaller, so I'm actually just going to distribute the extra fabric evenly, because the opening of the lining here at the top will be bigger than the opening of the coat. So I'm just going to distribute it all the way, or evenly around, And it doesn't matter that the lining is a little bit bigger inside at the top. It just gives you, you know, more freedom to move, and it looks fine. I will show you afterwards what it looks like. So don't worry about that. That is a fine way to do it. Just stitching it all in place. Like this. So now it's attached at the top. The lining is attached at the front openings. So now it's just the bottom. And even though it has this curved angle, you can still stitch it together. I just need to be sure that the fabric is aligned and that there isn't like a lot of excess fabric on the lining, because then that will pop out. So be careful that you don't make the lining longer than the coat, because then when you turn it around, you'll be able to see the lining kind of poking out underneath. So I'm making sure that the lining is a little bit smaller than the fabric of the coat itself. That will make it look nicer. All the way done. And now it's really good that I have that opening here in the sleeve, because I'm going to turn it open through that opening, being really careful because it's a lot of fabric. It's a lot of thick fabric, so careful when you turn it out to front. Ah, that's looking nice. The corners, as you can see there, that was the opening of the coat. And the zipper, everything looks so nice. So finishing off the sleeves here, making sure that they're ready to be stitched together. Fold them up front to front and then find them all the way through that opening that I kept, and then stitching them together. So you have the two seams, the seam of the lining sleeve and the seam of the coat sleeve, and you line them together, front of fabric towards the front of fabric, and then stitch it on all the way around, turn it out to front through that hole, and looks beautiful. The same thing done for the other side, I just didn't show you. Then it's just about closing it. So I'm finding that open hole and folding the fabric in towards each other so there are no raw edges, and then just closing it by making a seam like on the outside, because that will just be hidden inside the sleeve, so it doesn't matter that it might not look as pretty as it could. And then I'm just going to stitch the zipper in place. So you can leave it as it is, but this is just to be sure that it's easy to zip up and down, because sometimes when you have the lining and the fabric loose around the zipper, you know, it can get caught in the zipper teeth. So I'm just like pressing it towards the sides with my fingers and then stitching it on. I'm doing the same here at the top of the coat where the lining meets the collar. And we have that little strap there. I'm going to stitch it so it folds down as well, so it doesn't poke up. Just stitching it on very carefully. Coming down to the other side of the zipper now. So this is just simple stitch next to the zipper. So it's, yeah, just kept in place a bit more. And that is the end of that. The coat is done. And the girl who received it was happy. Thanks for watching. Bye.